Good evening, Jackie. It's been a trying 12 hours, and of course, Tropical Cyclone Keni remains in our system. I'm here with the Prime Minister, who's going to give us an update on the situation going forward. Prime Minister.
Thank you, Maggie. As you know, at 5 o'clock this afternoon, the storm was still very much in our waters. It was about 60 miles east-southeast of Kandava, and it's brought a lot of. We've received reports of damages to the schools in Bunisea and, of course, the homes in Kandava in general. But they're still very much in our waters. So there'll be damaging winds and heavy seas, especially in the southern Lao. There'll be flooding, of course. There'll be continuous flooding in the low-lying areas in Fiji because the rain, it has brought about rain, and the rain will, of course, come down in heavy downpours.
Can you tell us the situation with regards to the closure or the opening of schools?
Thank you. There's been advice from the Education Department and, of course, the officials here at NDMO, Disaster Management, that schools that have been used as evacuation centers, they, especially in the Western Division, they to remain closed. This is in the light of the number of schools being used as evacuation centers, the extent of the two flooding events. They need to complete the cleanup in most of those schools, so they will remain closed, the schools in the Western Division. The schools in Lambasa will open. Of course, in the Eastern Division will open, except for the schools in Kandava. The officials of the NDMO, the director, will give you a final brief on that. But the schools in Kandava and the schools in the Lambasa area will, of course, remain closed, as other schools in the Western Division that are being used as evacuation centers.
And the issue with regards to public transportation?
Thank you. As of tomorrow, public transportation is back on. Business as usual. Civil servants are required to be back at their posts, and of course the shops and supermarkets will of course be open.
With regards to inter-island ferries?
Inter-island ferries, there's been a recommendation that they remain, that they don't go out to sea. That there's no operation recommended for them right now, because, as I said, it's still very much in our waters, and there'll be heavy seas and heavy swells out in the open seas.
Prime Minister, given that Cyclone Keni is still within our system, what is your advice to everyone out there?
Well, my advice is the one I gave this morning, is to remain indoors, look after your family as well, store up food and water. As you know, electricity is down, and in the Western Division, it took down now our line from the main line from Bunda, and it went down. There'll be no water and no pumps, so you need to store water, look after your family, and of course store food, but stay away from flooded areas.
All right, thank you, Jackie. We'll leave it there.
Thank you.
Prime Minister said we are still, of course, grappling with TC Keni, which is still in our system. I'm here, of course, with the National Director, the Director for the National Disaster Management Office. He's been a familiar face with us over the last couple of hours. Voreqe, can you give me the latest in terms of operations going forward?
Thank you, Maggie. As we speak, the teams are currently going around the affected areas, visiting the various evacuation centers, visiting affected areas, low-lying areas and flood-prone areas, just to ensure that all those who are affected from the recent spate of flooding and also from the strong winds are taken to the necessary evacuation center. That's just to ensure that people are safe overnight before we further assess the situation tomorrow morning.
What is the current status of evacuation centers?
We have 119 evacuation centers with around 6,754 evacuees. That's for the whole of Fiji. We have some evacuation center out there in the Central Division. And also we have reports coming in from Kandava that the island has sustained some damages. Right now the Commissioner Eastern is still working on verifying the number of evacuation centers that are active. As we might have heard, the storm is still outside of Kandava, and I believe right now they're still facing some strong winds in some of those affected areas.
Anna, in terms of preliminary damage at this stage, can you tell us what's out there?
I think there's a reoccurrence of the flooding that they had gone for TC Josie. I think a lot of the areas that had been affected are affected again from the recent spate of events, and the teams will be out there to look at what are the current damages and also to begin the necessary cleanup that is required to restore normalcy in a lot of these areas.
In terms of priority areas for the NDMO over the next 12 to 24 hours, what will those be?
Thank you. The priority will be to ensure that we get the remaining schools that will be closed to resume back to normal classes. I know that the school holidays are coming up and there might be a lot of areas that might need cleaning up, so we might have to mobilize a lot of the resources that we have to ensure that we clean up a lot of the schools and also a lot of the flooded areas to ensure that those in evacuation centers are returned safely to their various homes.
So just to be clear, we've had in the west, the schools will remain closed. That will continue. In the north, however, there will be partial openings for some schools.
Yes, I believe we had agreed with the Ministry for Education that all schools that are used as evacuation centers to remain closed, that to ensure that the families or those who are in evacuation centers do the necessary cleaning up before they are returned to their homes. So basically those are the work that we have recommended. And also in the north, there are some schools that are being used as evacuation center, and also we are facing water disruptions in the north due to the damage at Tangalo water reservoir that has been reported by Water Authority. That is why we need to close some of the schools in the greater Lambasa area who will be affected by water disruptions in the area.
And just lastly, people listening tonight, what do you need them to do in terms of those in evacuation centers and people that are being affected by the flooding?
I think for those in evacuation areas, we recommend that they stay in the evacuation areas to wait out the receding of the waters before we further assess the situation tomorrow before everyone returns to their respective homes. For those in affected areas, given that it's getting to darkness, the teams will be mobilizing first thing tomorrow morning to assess all these areas and also to look at the needs assessment for the various people out in these affected areas to ensure that government responds accordingly to the needs of those that have been affected.
Thank you, Honorary. We'll leave it there.